and welcome back to another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Jay, and thank you so much for listening, whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you finally got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast, or maybe you're cooking dinner. I don't know what you're doing or wherever you're at, but regardless, thank you for listening, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, of course, Jay, and today I am bringing you a guest whose story demonstrates that it's never too late to reinvent yourself and explore new passions and learn from life struggles. Joining me today is Jeremy, a journalist, filmmaker, and early pioneer in the cannabis industry. Jeremy has he's won a lot of things too, but has worn many hats, from covering mixed martial arts as one of the first reporters in the field to innovating within the cannabis space by introducing, words are hard, artisanal hash to the public and hosting international events and competitions. In recent years, Jeremy has directed and produced around 30 independent documentary films featured on major streaming platforms like Amazon Prime, Fox, CBS, Apple TV, and Redbox. His Strange Phenomenon documentaries, focusing on everything from Bigfoot to UFOs, have captivated millions. Beyond entertainment, Jeremy's films also tackle the important social issues like bullying, animal welfare, and mindfulness. His own life journey has been filled with wild ups and downs, giving him firsthand insight into dealing with adversity, mental health challenges, and importance of resilience. Today, we're going to explore how Jeremy overcame personal struggles, found balance in life, and maybe talk a little bit of UFOs and things like that, while also embracing new opportunities. Can help people manage stress, discover purpose, and foster better environments for the family. So grab a seat, get comfortable, make sure you have a snack, make sure you have a juice box, and Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, quite an introduction. I appreciate that.
Of course, man. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a great little background, and I would be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't give them a nice little intro. So.
Sure. Yeah, everybody does have a story.
So, but Jeremy, it's great to have you. And your path is unique. You know, cannabis, Bigfoot, UFOs, all the things here, right?
Yeah.
And so from cannabis industry to documentary filmmaking and navigating intense personal struggle, could you give us like the skyline view of kind of your journey and what led you to where you're at today?
Sure. Like basically, I started out in a very conservative lifestyle. My dad is from Scotland. I was raised like strictly, and I was an altar boy. And I had Catholic school life all the way up until my high school life, when it started to get a little more wild and I was like kind of rebelling in various ways. And then all through my 20s were pretty wild. I sold drugs, I partied a lot, I did all kinds of stuff. And that's mostly what my book is about. I was home invaded numerous times. I was robbed. It was really a crazy time. And I stopped. I moved from that place, and I lived in Hollywood for a while. And my life dramatically changed as I kind of got into the cannabis industry officially, not just like selling out of my house. And I started eventually doing all these big things in the cannabis industry. And I got an identity in that world for a while. And the cannabis industry is very hype and trend based. And so as those projects kind of started to fizzle out, my life changed again. It was a dark time for me where I didn't really have anything. I had started working on a couple things that hadn't panned out, and I wasn't able to get any new jobs like producing events, which is what I was doing really successfully in the cannabis industry. So I was lost for a while working on this thing that everybody told me to quit, and it was filmmaking. And eventually I found direction with that, and I started having success with that. And that's gotten me to where I am now, where eventually an event in the cannabis industry did finally come to me when I'd given up on being in the industry ever again. And they asked me to produce their event. So now I do both things. I produce a cannabis event once a year, and then I also do all these films, and the filmmaking has become my passion. I never realized what I was missing by being in the cannabis industry, and now forced to be out of it, I found a whole new path in life that really fulfills me far greater. And I would have never found that had I not kind of been forced into it. So it's really an interesting full circle of how I've got to this point where we're funding all our own documentaries. I get to choose them. I direct them all myself. I shoot them all myself. And so I'm getting this like personal education from all these different people that are topics I'm interested in. It's a really wonderful adversity story where I've overcome it, and there was a time where it wasn't looking like that.
Okay. And so through all this, what are some of the things you've taken away along the way? Like what was the, if you could put it back to an event, one single event, or maybe two, or maybe just a time period of a couple events, what was like the biggest turning point? Like where was your turning point?
Okay, yeah. So I had been producing these cannabis events, and I was filming them because I knew, oh, we have to document these. They're very special in the industry, unique, and let's document this story so that we can tell it later because this is an important story. So I made this film like really crudely, where I hired a company to do it that mostly made highlight videos. They had never made a film before. And then we kind of like collaborated on the scenes, and I would go through and note things. It was a labor of love. Both of us were kind of learning as we were going. And then we ended up with this film that was, it was good for what we had been able to do, and everyone liked it, but it wasn't quite on the level of what was needed for mainstream filmmaking. And that was a dead end, so there was a lot of times where I was facing kind of a choice where, and I'm not sure I made the right choice also, so I'll state that too, where I was like looking at my role in the future and taking on a job that wasn't in the cannabis industry, and maybe like a low level job like working at McDonald's or something, just to make ends meet until I could get to getting this film produced and released. Originally, I was thinking once this film goes out, it'll be big, successful thing. I'll have all these opportunities in the cannabis industry. And that's not what happened. And so it was really fortunate that my opportunity came through filmmaking, because what I had originally planned didn't pan out. And I never took one of those lower jobs. I just suffered, and I stayed in people's houses, and I like barely ate, and I just didn't spend money for years while I was going through that struggle. And then the turning point really was when I met the partner that I work with now. So everyone had told me they could help me when I was making the film. Like, I work for Vice. I do this. I do that. Like there were all these stories about how people could get my project on some sort of big platform. And none of the stories were true. All of those people, when it came time, they had no pull whatsoever. They were maybe connected to some of those places at very best, but not able to make any sort of decisions or even really suggest anything. So it was dead end after dead end, shut door after shut door. And then I had a friend who introduced me to a guy who introduced me to a guy who introduced me to a guy, and that's the guy I work with now. And so it was, even then, like kind of a few door closed, but at least an olive branch of like, okay, here's some direction for you. Maybe this guy could help you. And ultimately that worked. And the partner that I work with now was making independent horror movies, and he kind of had come to the end of where that was really financially doing well for him. And he was wanting to explore doing documentaries, which could be this new financial opportunity for low budget filmmakers. And we started with a couple cannabis projects that I was wanting to make in addition to the original project that I had already made, because it's much easier to just do something right from the beginning rather than fix something that you had already made. And so we did those couple projects and they did okay. And then he's like, well, these are some of the other subjects that are popular in low budget documentaries. And we're not restricted to cannabis. We can make anything we want. So are any of these interesting to me? That's what he asked me, right? And he says like something like ghosts or UFOs, and I'm into all that stuff. And I remember saying to him, how about Bigfoot? he didn't say Bigfoot, but I said, how about Bigfoot? And he's like, yeah. And so we made a Bigfoot movie, and I'd be damned, that movie was virally successful. So it immediately made money, and I was able to buy more equipment and continue this whole journey. The very next one we did was UFOs, also did well. And so we were off and running. And from there, I've been able to kind of go back to the wheelhouse of like anything in the strange phenomenon world seems to do well for us. We hit that community right away, and they still watch a lot of those projects. Some of my other projects, they've done okay, but nothing has really done great where it gives me a whole other genre of topics to like keep delving into. I was really hoping that like diet and nutrition was going to be that, but we haven't struck it yet. So I make these movies, I think up the topics, and we go from there. And the big turning point was meeting my partner. It was, once I met him, the opportunities, the doors were just open, and he kind of walked me through all the things that I needed to do. He taught me how to shoot stuff and do my own sound and lighting and everything. So that was a game changer for me.
That's really cool. And sometimes all it takes is someone who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, right? Who knows another guy. But you never know, right? That's just kind of how life works. That's the cool thing about life, is that you keep trying, you keep going to, you go down one path and no, that path didn't go nowhere. Go back, go down another one, and that one didn't go nowhere. Sometimes just you got to keep trying, right? You have to keep trying. If you give up or you just, think about like, well, I'm just defeated, I'm just going to give up, right? And I'm sure there were those moments for you, right? Where it's like, oh,
Absolutely.
another dead end, another dead end. How did you work through those things? The adversity, the dead ends, the mental health struggles that came along the way.
Yeah, so some of those things were just kind of getting back to nature. So I remember I was up here. So I moved to the mountains because it was my most affordable option at that point. And I remember I didn't have a lot to do because I didn't have really any job that was paying me bills and requiring my attention. So all the things that I had been doing kind of went away, and I was trying to find things to do. So I would go hiking. I was looking after a friend's dogs at that time. And so I was fostering these dogs. I was taking them for walks in the morning and at night. And I was just kind of thinking a lot while I was doing those things, be watching the dogs and kind of being mindful of them getting into any sort of trouble. But also you're hiking in the forest, and I think something happens. I think that humans are meant to be more connected to Earth in all kinds of ways. And there's all these little health benefits that we're not entirely aware of that happen from being out there. And I remember I was hiking in the forest one time, and I remember thinking, I'm depressed. I feel lost. I'm like out here in this wonderful place. It doesn't feel good. It felt okay, but it felt, like I was trying to find myself, and I was not having any direction on that. And I was lost, that was the only way to describe that feeling. And slowly but surely through this like healthy lifestyle and then like trying to do things, I remember thinking, well, I'm going to finish my book. I've never finished it. I started it, and what could I do? And I figured out, I'll tell the stories of me doing these events and almost getting arrested and all the crazy times while I was doing the events to kind of go with the crazy times when I sold drugs. And that kind of worked. And it ultimately, I was able to finish my book. And, I just kind of chip away at little things, do odd jobs for people where I could make money, watch this person's house, do this or that. And it was another time where I also, I was microdosing mushrooms here and there sometimes too. And I remember walking in the forest and thinking I'd started the filmmaking journey, but it wasn't successful where I was like paying my bills or anything. We had made a movie or two, and they were making a few $100 here or there. And I hadn't made a few $100, in this way in a long time. And I remember walking in the forest again and feeling like, you know what? this depression thing, I think it's gone. And I remember feeling like hopeful. And I also remember thinking about, a lot of these things that uh, I'm interested in could be helping me, and I think about negative thoughts and how bad they are to think. And then I find myself like caught up in this negative thinking. And I need to change that to be more positive. And, I had a friend that was doing mindfulness stuff, and we talk about that. And like being grateful was one of the big things. And, I had to change my way of thinking from looking at the things that I didn't have, looking at my life as being lost and not finding the direction, versus like just focusing on the things that I did have that I was doing right at those times, and being grateful for all the crazy things that I had done that were, that made me who I was, and unique to the time in which I lived, and an adventure that not everybody gets to live. And so like I think I found myself through the changing of my perspective. And that was a really, really important lesson.
I love that. I love that. That's so important. And I really wanted to make a joke, and I'm going to make a joke. And so please bear with me. I like to kind of warn people on the first couple jokes because I don't want them to, get upset or anything. But are you sure the depression was gone, or was it just the microdose talking?
So that was one of the things that I also had to face myself, where I was like, why? I remember walking around and thinking, huh, is it because I'm doing the films and I'm making a few $100 here and there? Is that what it was? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That felt like some of it. I felt like, being out in nature. Is it just that I've been now hiking every day for
Mm-hmm.
like a year, maybe almost 2 years at that point? And like, this is starting to help me. I'm like I'm eating more healthy. I'm
Yeah.
exercising every day too, in addition to hiking. And the dogs are just love. It's such positive energy. I'm kind of being a hermit. So I'm not taking in a lot of negative because,
Yeah.
I'm just avoiding people in general. The COVID was going on. So there was like watching some of that craziness, and like it was,
That
and
must have been a weird feeling. Must have been a weird feeling being up in the mountains during COVID.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're like literally like
Well, what
in
ended
the
up
mountains.
happening was everyone came up to the mountains. So it was like
Oh,
more busy than it ever was. They all thought the same thing. They're like, oh, we'll just go up there. Nobody's up there. But it was, it was a weird thing. And then, like you had said, I remembered after hiking, I remember being back at home and thinking, oh, yeah, I'm microdosing like kind of a lot. Maybe that is having something to do with this positive feeling too. So I think it all works together.
no, it does 100%. It all does. And speaking as a mental health clinician, I can say it does. Where between everything you're doing, right, you're a little bit more isolated, right, and that's one of the biggest things to do in when you're trying to shift your perspective or work through some things is you have to take some of that alone time. You have to take more alone time than normal. You have to disconnect. Your situation sounds like some of it was by choice, some of it was by necessity, and it is what it is, right? Every situation is different, right? And so that isolation is kind of a good thing. That isolation probably led you to discovering and being more aware, it sounds like, of those feelings, right? You were more in tune with yourself because you had more time with yourself, right? You're away from all the noise, especially being you were still in like LA, Hollywood, right?
Well, I was in Big Bear, which is a couple hours from LA, but it's in the mountains.
Okay, okay. So
Hmm.
you're still like you're just getting away from all the like the busyness, right? The busy, like the noise, like
Yeah,
that's a loud area, right? That's a very loud area. There's just
yeah, and I
media and
still
news and
have to go
everything.
there because I take care of my parents who live out there.
But so there was a disconnect, like I was saying, like you had to disconnect and get away from it, and then you became more in touch with yourself. But then also the hiking, that is such a positive strategy because you're getting physically active, you're being out in nature, so you're getting vitamin D, fresh air, all the things, right, which are all so good for everybody. Everybody, those things are good for, right? You're doing it on a regular basis, so you have a habit, you have a routine. Maybe part of it was a microdose too. That can have some really, really strong benefit. I don't think we have enough released research to the common person to understand the benefits of those things, but there's some serious benefit to microdose of mushrooms and things like that can really help open up the brain, open up the mind in a lot of different ways that we just don't have access to because, you can call it whatever kind of conspiracy theory you want, but they're shut down by the big pharma for the exact reason. So people don't rely on something natural and holistic versus having to rely on big pharma for their drugs and things like that. So that's the whole thing. And then you also couple in nutrition, lifestyle, diet, exercise, all those things, you're going to start to feel a lot better, like really quickly, if you're doing those things on a consistent basis. If you're going from not doing it, isolating, very beginning, 2 years later, and you're starting to feel way better, those symptoms are probably way less than they were. Yes, there'll still be times where they flare up again, and there's some people who will hear this that'll think, oh, well, Jeremy's just numbing with the microdosing. He's just numbing. He's just avoiding it. But it's like, no, like you're actually actively coping because you're going out into nature, silence, things like that, hiking, diet, exercise, lifestyle. Like those are all active coping skills along with the microdosing to allow your mind to be able to process these things. So I think that's, a great way to deal with all the shit that comes on, right? All the things, the changing, the reinventing yourself, the mental health struggles, all the different ways you learn how to cope, manage stress, maintain your mental health, and provide, a stable environment for yourself to be successful. Because I can almost guarantee if you weren't doing those things, and then the turning point wouldn't have happened yet, or it wouldn't have happened in the same time frame because you would have missed that opportunity. That one first guy you would have talked to, like, this guy's kind of a wackadoo. He's not really there. He's talking to me about Bigfoot and aliens and blah, 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 blah. I'm not even going to pass him on to the next. But because you were doing all those things, what they saw in those meetings, I'm almost sure, is they saw a person who was, this dude's legit. This dude's got it together. He's got great ideas. He's got great experience. He knows what he's doing. Let me set him up with the next guy. Next guy, same thing. That conversation, that meeting, those meetings. Damn, this dude's got something. I don't know what it is, but people can feel that when they're with a healthy person, when they're next to a healthy person, when they're interacting with someone healthy and doing all the things and actively working on themselves. Like they feel that energy coming from them, right? They feel that energy. And then, goes to the next person. And then it's just like, you find that perfect match in the end because you're doing all the right things in your own personal life. And that's kind of the message here as well. Like once you're doing all the things in your own life, those blessings will come, right? They come as they come. And so it's really cool when we work on ourselves, we find that inspiration and move.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
So
one thing I did do wrong, I think, was I didn't take a lower level job because I didn't want to, it was partly an ego thing. I didn't want my friends in the cannabis industry to make fun of me. I think like when I look at how I was looking at that, I think that was probably the main reason why I didn't take on some sort of other job. And I'm positive that if I would have gone to work at some like place that I was looking down upon, like a department store or whatever it was, that interacting with the other employees and just telling them about my life, they would have been like, what? You did this? And as soon as I started to get that from people, I started to realize, oh yeah, I've done things. Like I just have been focusing on the wrong things. And that would have provided me money and a better mental perspective on my own life a lot faster than me working for however long, doing all these odd jobs and just avoiding having to do that. I think it was an ego thing that I should have gotten over, and I wish that I would have.
Yeah. Well, along the way, along every single story, there's a shoulda, woulda, couldas, but didn't, right? Or the things we wish we would have done slightly differently if we could do it again. So you wish you would have taken like something more entry level, lower level job just to kind of have something consistent.
Yeah, but I also am maintaining the concept that wouldn't have changed my direction, that I would have still been able to work on the things that I was trying to work on and hopefully be able to do those things when the time came and leave that job. Maybe it would have distracted me or been a problem in some sort of way too. And it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't do it. So I don't look back at that with too much regret.
Yeah, I think it would have taken a lot more of your time than you think it would have. I think that time that you would have dedicated to that you spent dedicating to doing other things, I think you would have missed, some of those opportunities. Maybe. And then, of course, there's distractions. There's people that you work with that you grow close to, getting to know other people and things like that. Relationships can form from there and things like that. And so then more distractions come, right? Distractions. And then they offer you more time, and then they offer you more money, or they offer you a growth opportunity. And so then you kind of get sucked in, right? And then, all these things. So I think it would have
That's very
been more of a distraction. And I think things that happen, happen for a reason. How they're supposed to happen. You're supposed to, get by, odd jobs, things like that. So you didn't get sucked into working for someone else, being told what to do all the time, losing out on opportunities. Because, if you're working in fast food like McDonald's, and I can say this firsthand, I ran a Sonic, that if you're already there and someone calls in, guess who they're going to ask very first to say, hey, can you stay? Or, hey, I need you to stay. And you could have had something planned, and you're going to be like, well, shit, I'm already here. I might as well, kind of thing. So we really get real sucked into that real quick. So
yeah, I tell myself that. I try to. I'm very self-critical, so I'm constantly analyzing my own choices, and when I think about that, I do look back at it as something I could have done better, but maybe it was a blessing in disguise.
yeah, no, and I think it always is a blessing in disguise. The things that we didn't do that we wish we would have done, and we look back and we're like, oh, maybe it's a good thing that didn't happen, or maybe it's a good thing I did take that left turn instead of that right turn, because you can see it all the time. Like I've seen it multiple times where it's like, oh, I was about to go down that street at that time, but I went another way that
Yeah,
time instead. That could have been me. That could have been me, or all those things. So those things happen all the time where it's like, man, that could have been me if I didn't make a different choice. And so it's a blessing in disguise. A lot of times, especially if we're like running late, and it's like, man, I'm usually there at 7:45 every single morning, right at that intersection where that accident happened at 7:46 today. But I was running late. I was 5 minutes late because my kids had to take a poop before they left out the door. Um, kind of thing.
right.
Some things happen, and you can call it coincidence or whatever you want. I call it God and just divine intervention in that part. But that's me. But I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about what the people came here for. UFOs and Bigfoot, a little bit. So please, if you would, give me your Bigfoot theory, or your favorite Bigfoot theory, the one that you feel most like invested in at this point.
So I talked to a lot of people about cryptozoology and Bigfoot and what have you. And some of the stories are really wild, where they've said Bigfoot dematerializes, that Bigfoot is maybe some sort of a human alien hybrid. There's a lot of wild stories out there with Bigfoot. I kind of gravitate to more the traditional story of like, maybe this is some sort of undiscovered primate, not necessarily human, maybe more like a ape monkey type of creature. And maybe not all of them are true stories, or still around at least. It seems like a lot of the stories were true in the past, potentially, but maybe those things don't exist now. There's not a lot of great evidence for Bigfoot. So as you're looking for Bigfoot, you have the footprints, you have eyewitness testimonies, which is mostly the thing that people are most convinced by, because you'll meet people that tell you they've seen Bigfoot, they believe it in their heart, it was a traumatic experience for them. They feel like they could not be mistaken, and so they know. And when you talk to somebody like that, you kind of get that feeling from them that this is a real thing. Then there's not pictures. There's like, they say there are hair samples, but then where is all the data? Like, these studies need to be easily available to anyone to analyze and look at, like the actual documents. When I do UFO stuff, the UFO guys have so much evidence. They have like government redacted documents.
That's gonna be next. That's gonna be next. That's gonna be next.
There's just so much. And the Bigfoot is very lacking in evidence. And so we've done both. We've done a story where, from a logic perspective, is Bigfoot likely to exist? And it doesn't seem likely from a logic perspective. But then from the experiencer's perspective, there's all these people who have had these like very profound experiences. There are some videos, and they all kind of fight about whose video is real, or there's not like a large consensus of like, these are the real pieces of evidence. So Bigfoot, to me, if we ever are able to find and prove one of these stories, because they are everywhere in the world, I think it would be an undiscovered animal, like an ape or a primate of some sort, that is just somehow out in the deep forest and able to avoid identification for however long. But
Yeah.
we need more evidence. And now that we have all this great technology to collect evidence, we really need more evidence.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I grew up and lived in the Pacific Northwest my entire life. So Bigfoot's been kind of integrated into my brain since I was a small child. Um, right? And one theory that's always stuck with me, it's actually a religious theory, right? And I don't know why, but this theory just always has made the most sense to me with Bigfoot. And so you go back to the Bible, you look at the Cain and Abel, right? And Cain, you hear the curse of Cain, right? Have you heard of the market where basically God marked the Canaanite and they have the curse of Cain, or they were of darker skin tone, things like that. He marked them in these certain ways. The theory then goes that the Canaanites were then banished, right? And then they were kind of banished and never heard from again. And back then, in early Bible times, what's documented is that these people at that time were just bigger people. They were just larger. Like we have shrunk as a society, as humans, we've shrunk. And so people back then, like you say, you hear David and Goliath in the Bible. Like David was probably about my size, 5 feet to 6 feet tall. I'm 6 foot. David was about that tall. And then you hear Goliath was a giant. It had giant people back then that were 8, 9 feet tall. Look at the Baltic people. They're huge. They're ginormous. Vikings, things like that. Like they are ginormous. Sorry, excuse the cat. She's always on my desk. But so then Cain and Abel, the Canaanites were banished and they went into the wilderness. Where's Bigfoot in the wilderness? And so then the Canaanites, they developed, they changed how they approached things. And so they found fur and coats and things like that, and animals and pelts and things like that to make them appear furry to keep them warm. But they've been in the wilderness ever since these Bible times, and they've never really fallen off the face of the earth, essentially, because they've always been in these areas, highly forested, and they were able to survive and make it through time and just evolve and adapt that with the time. So that's kind of where the Bigfoot theory for me, theory that's really stuck with me, is that these are the Canaanites and they're just kind of hiding. And so because they were banished and they don't know what else to do because they're just banished and they've just always lived there. So it's a far-fetched theory as it is, but that's the theory that's always had the most like grounding for me.
I like it.
Okay.
I've never heard that one.
Yeah, so that's like a religious theory, but that's the one that's always made the most sense to me. It's like, wow, that could be because they were marked. These people are bigger, they're hairier, they're darker, kind of thing, and they're human-like, and so of course they're gonna have bigger footprints. Of course they're gonna have overgrown nails and hair and things like that because they're afraid of people. They were told by God, you're banished, and so they know they can't go around people. They can't get too close to people. If they see people, they got to run and hide.
Sure.
And things like that. So it's one of those things that I can never kick that idea.
The giants thing is a story in and of itself. They say that the Smithsonian has like giant skeletons that they're hiding from us, and maybe potentially Bigfoot that's being hidden. But if they're the government or whoever is hiding these things from us, I would really love to see some sort of documentation that
Right.
shows that there's some sort of something being hidden from us. That's what I love about the UFO guys. The UFO guys are you're like, I need this, and they just pretty much keep coming up with it. Like we're getting really close to proving this stuff.
Yeah, there's some wild UFO theories, and I listen to Rogan a lot, so I hear a lot of UFO theories on there.
Sure.
But they're really good, and they keep developing. He has the same guys on to talk about the UFO theories time and time and time again. And every time they come back, they got a little bit more. Every time they come back, they got a little bit more. I think I've heard who is it? There's someone that goes on his show. I don't know who it is. I can't think of names, but the UFO one's an interesting one because there's so many. Let's go back to is it the Roswell incident?
Sure.
Or is that the one where they were like on the tapes, they had it taped, and then they were able to find like the edge of the spacecraft, or am I thinking of a different one?
So Roswell's the crash where they had the news report, and then they're like, oh, no, it's not a UFO, it was weather balloons.
Okay, yeah. So that's what they say. But then they also there was somewhere
Rendlesham Forest where they they have like a tape recorder and they go out and they see the UFO, they talk about it, and like one of the guys allegedly touches it. Like there's
Yeah, that one. And then those tapes were like, one of the dudes had the tape still, and he was like hiding out in the forest or something or somewhere with the tapes. And then someone recently was able to go and get those tapes, pay him a bunch of money to get them. I don't remember who it was, but I also get the things confused. I think
there's a lot
between
of good
Roswell,
stories, and
yeah, and then the
the
Brazil one, right?
UFO, like the subject is very deep, where some of the stories are kind of wild. Where I did a film recently where the couple had written a book about that they think a lot of this stuff is interterrestrial, which means it's from a group of human beings that went to live underground 30 years ago. They've evolved differently than us underground, and that all these UFOs and what have you are coming from Earth. And that's why they're concerned with the things they're concerned with. And that's a really, fascinating but kind of unique theory. And then some of the other theories are these are government programs that they're just hiding technology that we've been working on, maybe from Roswell, back engineering, or this and that. So there's the stories, they go all over the place. And I love that the evidence is redundant. So like you'll have Air Force pilots that they see it with their eyes. They have like radar evidence of it. They have multiple different kinds of radar evidence, maybe, or like different kinds of camera evidence of it. Multiple witnesses, so not just one person saw it, but multiple people saw it. And then they'll have the documents. They'll have documents that confirm all of this stuff that can then be shown and proven. And some of it's redacted, where they're blacked out this or that. But it's obvious something's going on. And so I love delving into the UFO thing the most personally. That's the thing I feel like we're the closest to getting somewhere and proving something.
Yeah. I personally think, and I saw this video once, and it made a lot of sense to me, and I've never been able to stop thinking. Another thing I've never been able to stop thinking about, right? It lives rent free in my head. But there was like this AI generated video. It had Biden's voice, Trump's voice, Putin's voice, and all these voices, right? And it's probably a couple years ago I saw this, but basically it also had the artificial intelligence voice, or it had the advanced intelligence, alien voices too. And basically all the aliens were in pyramid-shaped looking UFOs. And, people were kind of going out of control, and then they saw like the UFO over like New York City, when it was the shape of a pyramid, right? And then the people were talking, like the voices were coming from the pyramids, and then there's all these pyramids in outer space, and then they were racing to space to go to like the mothership period, and United States launched a team up there, and then Russian launched a team up there, but Russia launched nukes into them, and then everyone's nuking each other, so then the world's all nuked, and then the aliens come and they take the people they want to take up into their pyramid UFOs, and then it was like a 3-minute video. It was intense.
Wow.
But if you think about that, the pyramid shape is what was really interesting to me.
Sure.
Then we have all these pyramids in all over Africa, all over the place, right? In multiple different continents. We have the same pyramids, we have the same artwork, we have the same thing. From people that we say didn't know how to communicate, that we say they had no actual way to communicate. Okay, well, if they didn't know how to communicate, if they didn't have the technology or the ability to sail and take word across these places, right? For until 1700 when Christopher Columbus sailed, right? I call BS on that first. Like, okay, how is the pyramid here in the same model, here in the same model, here, in all these different areas that are separated by land and sea? Okay, that there's no way, right? And then some of the pyramids, and you look at the Sphinx, right? That's even more complicated. And then there's parts of these pyramids that we can't even get access to because there's like hidden or trap doors. We have to send tiny little robot drones into them with cameras and stuff, and it's like, and then they're blocked, right? So they're so intricate. They are so intricate, okay?
Yeah.
But why are there only so many pyramids left? There's like one here, a couple here, Sphinx here. Why are there only certain ones left behind? Right? Why are there only certain ones left behind? There has to be more, right? Because if there was this many people who probably took how did they build them in the first place? What technology were they using? How advanced was technology? I think they left the ones that were kind of the prototypes. Like those were the ones that were the prototypes that they were just trying to figure out how to build them and whatnot, the shape, sizes, things like that, dexterity. They used stones, and then over time they got more advanced, and so then they were able to build these ships, essentially, or these capsules or whatever you want to call them. We say ships or submarines or whatever, right? I think there's two theories here that kind of stem from this. So the pyramids go, and then they were able to advance them. So then they take these pyramids into space, and then they just continue working on them. They're able to go back and forth between Earth and space and work on their pyramids, grab materials where they need to grab them. Hence the encounters. They're able to send smaller, like little pyramid ships in or saucer ships in to go and fly real quick and get something. One goes off course, crashes, kind of thing. And of course, their bodies changed over time, right? Their bodies change over time. They get more like they lose bone density, things like that. Hence why we get the liquid things. And then the crash in Brazil that had remains recovered. I think it was the Brazil one. The remains stink. Of course, if you're in space and you're not showering, your bones are all dense, so you're gonna stink. You're gonna smell really bad, especially whatever you're eating, and maybe you're not eating, maybe you're eating each other, maybe you're cannibals. Who knows? Whatever that looks like, who knows? We don't know. Hence the smell, right? And then there's also part of them that went to space, and there's also part of them that stayed on Earth in the sea, like in the deepest, darkest depths of the seas, because they knew they could be hidden, they knew they wouldn't be bothered, and they knew they could figure out a way to make their ships work, but underwater and stay hidden and concealed for a long time. Hence why random things show up on Navy radars and ships and things like that, and then they're gone. And like they show up, they're gone, right? Some of those things can be explained that way. So I think it all stems somehow, one way or another, stems from the pyramid, and I think it is interhuman, right? It's not a different species. It's not a different, life. I think it's all human life that was able to develop and evolve, and then bounce when it was time to bounce, because they went through the cycle that we're at. Everyone got advanced. Everyone had the technology. Everyone had the things, and then it was just a race to kind of get out of here before something bad really happened, before the flood, before something else happened, before Christ came, or whatever it looks like, right? Or before whatever happened next. And then humanity had to reset, which is why we kind of had to reset the ideas of, monkeys and forests and apes and things like that. But I think they've all been around for a really long time, and they've just gone through multiple resets. And we're just living in we're in the 2024 year of the reset, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Or we're in the 3,000th year, because there was time before Christ, right? That we have history of, right?
Right.
So I think all the alien stuff comes from before that, before Christ time that we had, because I think everything got hard reset, and now we're living through that reset again.
Yeah. So Rogan has a lot of the guys on that talk about some of these things. So one of the Air Force pilots saw what they were saying was like cubes inside of spheres, right? Like little balls with cubes inside of them. I think there might have been something that was like pyramids also. As far as pyramids, they're discovering new ones as they are kind of doing this LiDAR technology all over in these various places. So there's undiscovered things in the Amazon, some of them being pyramids. And there are all kinds of kind of references to that, like you said, where like these cultures have extremely similar designs all over the world, where there's a theory that maybe there was a designer that was common with all of them somehow. And what was that, right? Like, was it
what is that?
Something else? Maybe somehow they all were able to get this knowledge at the same time. There's a lot of theories as to how these things happen. And then, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of underground UFO theories where a lot of the sightings are in the water. And there's the Christopher Columbus sighting. There's all kinds of sightings in the water where it seems like they're like coming out from underground, or that there's maybe underground bases or things like that could be maybe us from the past. Or there's also theories that these are time travelers that are coming back from the future. It's a really interesting thing. And I love all the theories. I love talking to the people and hearing their different perspectives. And I think like bits and pieces will all kind of come together eventually to make the story that we eventually can prove about one of these things.
Yeah.
I find it all fascinating.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's just really interesting, because it's like you have to be curious, right? You have to be so curious about these things in the right way, to where it's like, okay, well, that's not a coincidence. How is there a pyramid, like you're saying, like how are there pyramids in the Amazon, or pyramid looking things in the Amazon, or similar artwork here? And then, okay, then we wonder, okay, how did the people get from Africa to the Caribbean, right? How did people get from Africa to Haiti? And their stories only go back so far, right? People can tell you the stories of the land, things like that have been passed down, but then they all stop at a certain point, right? And that point's really similar everywhere, right? Like in America, we track it back to Christopher Columbus and settling the Americas, things like that, right? But then Native American history goes further back than that, but then it stops, right? European history goes further back, but then it stops. Right? All these histories all have a stopping point at some point. It's like, where did all these different languages and dialects come from? Someone was speaking them. Someone taught the original people. They weren't just made up by one person. They were already there and established, and it doesn't make sense how they all kind of happen or how they're happening. We understand it now, but it doesn't make sense in like long term.
Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries to the history of all of this stuff. And, we're dealing with other countries that, don't allow investigation into some of these things too, where they've kind of said, we'll figure that out way down the road. And, hopefully we get more and more studying and more investigating and more answers out of these things. Some of the things that they think, one of the big theories in the UFO world right now is that these things are not humans, that they're somehow demonic or angelic or connected with spirits or other dimensions. So, I love it all. I want to just learn more.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard that theory before, how it's connected to like spirit and whatnot.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson was on his show on like whatever channel it was talking about it. There's like mainstream people that are now talking about this theory that used to be kind of there's a investor in ML Marzulli, I think that's his name, and he has a whole story about the sighting of Bernadette and in Fatima, where they saw Mary, and then they had like this. They said there's going to be a thing in the sky. They just told everybody in the town. Everybody in the town comes out. Like thousands of people see the sky do stuff. They say this like weird thing, and he has a whole theory on how it was actually a UFO. And there's a little crossover here and there religiously with the UFO subject, and so that's an interesting theory too.
Yeah, no, I mean it's all possible, right? It's all possible. It makes me interested to hear what Tucker's saying about it. I would say UFOs and Christianity don't really align very well. That's kind of an extreme link there, but I think there is a big realm of the spirit and the demonic and the angelic that we have opened ourselves up to in the last, couple hundred years. Between all the religions and all the sects and all the different things, the pagan culture, the devil worshipping culture as well, and just all these different cultures and whatnot. There's so many different people that have opened themselves up to all these things to come into the reality, right? And to have an influence, because we've allowed that, which is great, which is fine, right? We've allowed just as much angelic as we have allowed demonic, in my opinion. They're all out there. All things are equal, right? I don't think there's more of one less than the other. I think there's just about the same as each other. But we don't understand it, right? We don't understand it. I think there's a point to it that sometimes we think we're doing one thing. Different cultures may think they're doing one thing and summoning something holy, when maybe they're actually summoning something, not, because they've just been taught that, oh, this is holy for this reason, but the actual true history of it that they don't understand is something beyond that. Maybe it's something actually kind of demonic or something, and we don't understand that. So we're opening our lives up to these things. We're opening our hearts and our minds up to these things to kind of come in and consume us. And maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're dark. Maybe some are light, right? People always talk about auras and the feelings, and it's like, I was doing that thing, and I went to that building, and it felt kind of weird. It felt kind of eerie. I was at that place, and I know I just kind of had to leave. And then later we see that a story on the news or something's like, oh, that club was, shut down for, sex trafficking or whatever. It's like, oh shit, no wonder I didn't want to hang out there. Bad vibes going on kind of thing. Now it's just vibes, right? Good vibes and bad vibes. But there's certain places that feel really good, really comfortable, or sometimes you could just be going to your local Walmart or Target and you're like, it feels off in here. It just feels weird. Or when you go to work, like I work in an office, there's some days where I go in, I'm just like, it feels in here. I need to can you still hear me? Yeah. I need to invite some kind of spirit in here. This is weird. This is not good. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
kind of thing. So it's every day's like that, and so but we don't really. People have an idea of what these things are, right? But I don't think anyone really knows. We have ideas, but we don't really know.
we did a film on a book that a guy wrote called The Space Between the Space. And it's about kind of frequencies and vibration, and that some of these things are kind of connected to us in a way that we need to kind of dial ourselves into being able to see them or communicate with them, interact with them, or however these things are happening. That we made a movie. It's called Celestial Deceptions. I think it's on YouTube. It'll eventually be on all the platforms. And he says that he's experienced demons and demonic places like that, where he would kind of dial himself into these like meditative states where he becomes more sensitive. And then he would be in some of these places where he could like kind of experience some of those feelings, like what you were saying.
Yeah. And so I think that it's possible to get into those places, right? And I think psychedelics are also a great way to kind of experience some of that. Psychedelic, I think the MDMA for PTSD for veterans, I think that's very powerful. There's something about that, being able to use a psychedelic drug that's natural, that doesn't really have any harming effects, right? Because we don't know what Big Pharma's putting in shit, really. They don't tell us. But, MDMA is just MDMA. We know where it comes from. We know where it's sourced from, things like that. But how is it able to, and there has to be something deeper and spiritual to it, right? Hence why it's been around forever in all these different cultures and all these different texts and historical texts and, all these areas. And then these veterans that take it, their PTSD is manageable. It's like gone. They've worked through it. They've healed. How is that possible if it's not something, spiritual that happened in
Yeah.
one way or another? Or, drug addiction, things like that. Like addiction is hard, but how come these psychedelics that open up the mind and you read the accounts of these people or listen to them talk about it, it's like it was something spiritual that happened. It was something deep and spiritual that happened to them, that they were able to overcome this thing. And a lot of them say it's God. A lot of them say it's something like God that's happening to them in those psychedelic trips, things
I've
like
done
that.
a couple of films about psychedelic medicine, and I'm working on a film right now about alternative medicines in general. And I've personally experienced a lot of psychedelics and whatnot.
Careful, you might get shut down by the Fed.
The MDMA one is a popular one. I like to point out to people the MA in MDMA stands for methamphetamine.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so this is something that we make. It's a human-made thing. It's maybe isolated or something, but it's not a naturally occurring thing as like, mushrooms or, some of the other drugs that are out there.
Oh, I thought some of it was naturally occurring. My bad.
So that's okay, but because I believe in, LSD is not naturally occurring either, but it's extremely helpful. And MDMA is doing all the things that they're saying for PTSD. It's helpful for veterans, but it is something that we're using. It's a drug. And I think part of the thing that's helping people is how they're using it. We took MDMA and went to raves. And you get some of the benefit from that, but it's not like when you take it and you have like a therapist who's going to like walk you through your healing process. So there's also ketamine clinics. So that's a isolated chemical too. That seems to be extremely helpful to people. And doing all these drugs, I've done MDMA a bunch of times. I've done LSD. I've done ketamine before. LSD and ketamine are very similar. I could see how these things could be helpful to people. A lot of the things that are happening are just you're forced to kind of think about your own life, and you're faced with you're kind of facing your own fears in many ways when you're taking these drugs. Even one of the famous things Bob Marley used to say about cannabis, he said, cannabis shows you to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of the healing that's happening is actually people just kind of thinking through these problems and coming to conclusions on direction that they could take to heal themselves. I don't necessarily think that it's coming from somewhere else. I think personally that all of this is happening in your brain. I don't think that when you take DMT, you're actually interacting with other beings. I've interacted with them. I think that they're created in my brain. And I've had other experiences that I've done a salvia. So you may have never heard of that, but it's like the evil twin of DMT. And for a long time, fully legal, you could like go to a gas station and buy salvia. So when I was young, we went through this period of time where we were just getting the strongest stuff and doing it. And I had an experience where my mom, like my friends were fooling around, and they said to me that my mom came into the room. I saw my mom like come into the room. It was this whole experience that after it happened, they had to tell me, oh no, she didn't come in here. Like that didn't happen. It was real to me. And that's a person that's alive. So I could like go in there and be like, hey mom, you aware of any of this stuff? No idea, no connection. So my brain created my mom. She walked into the room. There was like a very like easily documented situation here where this is not something that really happened. This is something that happened in my brain, and everybody around saw me like do all this weird stuff while it was going on, and that kind of opened my eyes to like the likelihood that probably all of it is things that happen in your brain. So I think that the healing is something we can all do, and it's just getting to that thought process. And if it's taking mushrooms that's going to help you to get there, then let's do it. One of the other things I wanted to mention doing my documentaries, macrodosing mushrooms has documented effects where they can measure how much it's healing, all the good things that they say that it does. They can measure those things. But microdosing, we don't have any evidence that it works yet. Like there's no measuring of anything. We haven't been able to kind of prove that yet. And we're all like, we want to prove that that works. We all feel like it works, but there's no evidence that it works yet. So it's all just anecdotal. And maybe someday we're going to figure it out. But right now, the evidence is all for macrodosing. So the theory would be that you do a couple macrodoses every year, and that's going to provide a pretty tremendous amount of healing for your brain. And maybe that can help you.
Yeah. The biggest question I always have, or the biggest thing I wonder is, why aren't these things more available? Why are these things so taboo? Why are they so cut off? Why are they so try to be controlled by the government? Because that should be the biggest question here, right? That should be the big takeaway, is the people who know and who have experienced it, who have gone through it, that talk about it openly, there's a healing there, right? There's something there, that there's a benefit. There's some clear benefit to it.
I can explain this to you really quickly.
Yeah.
So because of ketamine now being legally distributed in clinics, but not legally available to recreational people, you're seeing now in the public things like what happened with Matthew Perry, where his doctor or whoever is getting him this ketamine that's really supposed to be for these clinics to help people. And these people are doing it recreationally outside of the clinic. So the worry is like we get LSD clinics, well, they're just going to be selling LSD out the back door. And so the problem is people for almost everything.
Yeah.
The problem is us. And that for all of us that want to do the right thing and be responsible and, do all these, we think about it from our own perspectives. There's people out there that are going to abuse it, that are going to do it wrong, that are going to take all the things that we know and they don't care. They're just going to exploit and misuse these things however they can. And it's a battle between the good people that want to have this available responsibly and then preventing things like what happened with Matthew Perry.
Yeah. No, and that's true. That's true. There's always the extreme sides of it, right? On both sides. There's always the ones that are going to do it just perfectly how you're supposed to do it, just enough to, make an impact. There's going to be those that do it way too much and abuse the system and things like that. And that's always going to happen. That's in every single situation. But one thing I've said for a long time is, just imagine the world peace that we have. Everyone just, did a little microdose of something every few days, right? If everyone just doing a little bit of something every few days, the world would be a better place. Like, yes, there was still documented wars and stuff back throughout history, but it's like, there's no documented like history of people being like as contentious as we are, right? In our country, so divided and things like that. These people had tribe mentalities. They found tribes and they didn't kick people out of their tribe for disagreeing. They embraced those disagreements and they still, were part of the same tribe at the end of the day, right? But now it's like, if you disagree with the tribe, you're ousted. Go find a new tribe. It's like, that's not a tribe mentality. So it's like, why have these things been around for so long? And now they're unavailable because people are dumb, pretty much, which is a great reason. honestly. But it's like, what? Look at where we become, because look at how society's kind of come without those things. And what if those things were reintroduced? Like, what would the world look like if those things were reintroduced to majority of people that were open to it?
Yeah, I
What?
agree with that.
Just imagine the world peace, right?
Ultimately, I think even with the concerns that I've kind of expressed, I think that it would be better to have these things available to people. The large majority of people are going to get helped from them. It's not going to be 100%. You know, the thing is, no medical cures of anything are 100%. But a lot of people are going to get help, and I think that just kind of being mindful of the things that we need to be cautious of, and you know, having penalties for those things, like if a doctor is selling the ketamine to people in massive amounts, or we just need to try and deal with these problems rather than eliminate the possibility for help for everyone, because having that available to people to help people is a greater importance than dealing with more car accidents or whatever could be
Yeah.
a problem. And we don't even know. We really need to kind of test it out and slowly introduce this in places and kind of deal with it as it goes along. And that's kind of what's happening. There are places right now that sell mushrooms that are, it's illegal. You're not allowed to just sell mushrooms right now. But there are places that do it. And there's chocolate bars going around in the underground, and it's slowly becoming a thing. And I just hope that, we live in a very hype and trend based society. If we can kind of make the hype and trend this healing storyline, and that everybody becomes motivated to use these things responsibly in a healing way, and it becomes not cool to, just be doing it on a Saturday in the park, like to try and be more mindful about where and how, maybe even create certain environments where these things could be done in a safe way. Like, all of that would be better. You don't want to hear about somebody like jumping off of the Matterhorn on LSD.
Yeah.
Like I used to go
Yeah.
to Amsterdam every year, and you would be able to buy mushrooms legally in the smart shops. And then one year they had a girl jump out of a building, and then now you can't buy mushrooms in the smart shops anymore.
Yeah.
And so those are the problems that we're facing. Some of those things are, that particular incident I don't think was legitimate, but that's what ended up happening. And, it wasn't rightfully because we need to protect people from mushrooms so that they don't jump out of buildings. That doesn't seem to be the actual situation here. But that's what the laws changed to be. And so we could easily be facing those kind of things here in this country if people are irresponsible in the wrong way, and it becomes like a big news story, and the trend and hype becomes these things are dangerous versus these things can help people.
Yeah. And just imagine, being able to, the majority's helped, right? And then you have time, the resources that are available to go and help the ones who are doing the wrong things. If 80%'s helped, right, the 20%'s not, or the 20% that's doing wrong things, then law enforcement and, firefighters and those people who are social workers, social services, things like that, can actually help the 20% and rehabilitate them and help rehabilitate.
Absolutely.
Prisons
And then
can
as a
actually be
society,
places for rehabilitation too.
if we're aware of these things, we can kind of monitor these things. When people get too drunk, a lot of times we're able to kind of identify those things and take care of those things as a group where it doesn't go too far most of the time. And so there's going to be situations where things go wrong, and we have laws, and we have, companies, services like paramedics that are around to take care of these things. They should be well funded, and we just need more of those, and that would be better for everyone.
Yeah. So and it would just take, it would take trial and error, and things would have to happen. You would have to start, and what better place to start than a bunch of men and women? And this is kind of weird, but it's already being done, right? But the prison system introduce it. That's a controlled study. They do it all the time with a bunch of different shit in prison. Believe it or not, they
Sure.
use prisons as test places all the damn time. It's been throughout history. I mean, that's just fact. So, but imagine, like, okay, control study. I'm going to go into a prison that has 2,000 men. I'm going to go to one that has 2,000 women. Then you can study it in a controlled, contained environment. where it's safe, where people aren't going to be jumping off things, hanging themselves, jumping off buildings, things like that. It's in a controlled environment. You can see exactly what the signs and symptoms and things like that are, because you're going to have 4,000 different personalities. You're going to have 4,000 different ages. You're going to have 4,000 people, essentially, right? And just the data you can get from that study is going to be immaculate. You'll be able to look at, this is what someone looks like when they're overdosing. This is like something to watch out for when it's not working. And then you have all the things. You have all the resources to be able to put a study out. And then guess what? Out of those 4,000 people, I guarantee you, at least 2,500 of them total are then rehabilitated in some way, shape, or form to be able to go out and become productive members of society. So then you just won this study. Now you just have 2,500 more people going back into the workforce, into society, that are healed, that are healthy, that are rehabilitated. And it's like, holy shit, this works in prison. This is a great way to help actually rehabilitate people, which is the point of prison, right? Or it should be. Should be the point to rehabilitate. Should be the point to rehabilitate, but it's not. Unfortunately, we know that very well. So I just think there's opportunities here, and we just have to kind of do it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, then that's a whole other issue. That's a whole ethical issue, because that's always going to be here too. But if it stops working, then you have to kind of plan B to get these people back stabilized and clean and whatnot to help them, kind of thing. But it's possible. It's very possible to make these things happen, and we just don't make it happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, there are people working on those things, and so I think you're right, and I think that hopefully someday in the future we are going to see progress on all of those things.
Yeah, and hopefully that day's in the near future. Hopefully we could see that day happen.
Yeah,
I think it would be a great thing for our country, a great turning point in history.
I think we'll
for everyone.
See it.
So yeah, I think it's coming. I think it's definitely coming in the next 10 to 15 years, if not sooner. I think everyone's waking up to the idea, the possibilities of these things, so I think it's on the horizon. But I think that, and is that a wrap, or anything else you want to add into the conversation here, or are you ready to wrap things up?
My films are all available on YouTube and Tubi TV and Amazon Prime, and you can look my name up, Jeremy Norrie, and some of those platforms will have a whole page dedicated to all my films. Or you can go to my IMDb page. I have a list of all my films there. Or my website, theskyisland.com. It's not quite as up to date as IMDb, but it has a list of most of my films and where you can watch them there as well.
Perfect. And of course, I'll link all those things in the show notes. I just want to give a shout out to that opening beat that everyone heard at the beginning of the podcast. Is brought to you by the Podbeat app. Podbeat is a free service for you podcast lovers or you audiobook lovers to enhance your audiobook or your podcast listening to the next level by turning it into a musical experience. Highly recommend Podbeat. Love the people, love the product. Great. Also want to shout out the mental app as well. It definitely goes along with the themes of this. If you're looking for a way to increase your mental health, this is the number one app for you. If you're looking for cold shower protocol, AI coaching, daily doses, daily affirmation, daily things like that, to really help you take back control of your mental health, the mental app is the app you need. You can get mental for free. You can go to getmental.com/youngdadpod, and you can download the mental app. You can try it for 7 days free. Try out the cold shower protocol. Check out all the tools, things like that are in there, and really start to feel the benefit in the first week. I promise you'll feel something if you try it for a week and you're consistent with it. Consistency is key here. So I just want to give a shout out there. And Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing your story and insights with us today. Your journey shows that no matter the hardship, there's always room for growth, learning, and finding balance. For our listeners who want to keep up with you, again, with your work or watch your documentaries, I'll link the IMDb page, and I'll also link Sky Island as well in the show notes. So whether you're interested in strange phenomena, social issues, or personal development, Jeremy's films offer new perspective and can inspire you to approach life's challenges with curiosity and courage. And of course, thank you all for tuning into the Young Dad Podcast. This has been Jey and Jeremy. We're super excited to have had you today. Remember, adversity can become a catalyst for positive change, and embracing the unknown may lead you to discover strengths and opportunities you never knew you had. Until next time, take care and stay open-minded.